All right. So I wanted to review the last two videos that were due for today, just to kind of open up some discussion on them. And so if we're going to look at the discussion questions once I'm able to get my screen shared here. Ooh, that was the wrong button. I just ended the meeting. All right. So the section 3 video was on disability insurance and long-term care and identity theft. And so I want you in the chat box to answer the discussion question number 1 there. Why do you think so few people carry long-term disability coverage? Why do you think so few people carry long-term care, long-term disability coverage? I'd like everybody to answer that on the chat box. So go ahead and start entering. Looks like Corey's fast on the trigger this morning. Nice. Don't think they'll need it. Don't expect bad things will happen. Yeah, I think people tend to be overly optimistic about life, right? Even with this coronavirus that, oh, it's going to be gone in a couple weeks, and a couple weeks goes by and it'll just be a couple more weeks. The data seems to suggest otherwise. So they don't need it. They don't feel like they'll ever need it. Yeah, so kind of this over optimism. Human beings, one thing we study in economics is overconfidence bias. So we tend to think that we're better at things than we actually are, or that it won't happen. And so certainly that is one thing for the long-term disability. The thing about long-term disability insurance, as the video pointed out, is that it is fairly cheap. I get long-term disability coverage through Ottawa University as part of my insurance package. But to pick it up, if it's going to be long-term, the likelihood of that happening to a relatively healthy person is pretty low. And so that means when the probability is low, the insurance is pretty cheap. So it's not a very high premium, similar to some other coverages that we had. I was curious, has anybody known anybody that's had their identity compromised? Discussion question number 2. Not everybody has to answer this, but I was just curious if you had, and maybe you can even unmute if you had anybody. I'll give a little pause, but the second question there, whether somebody's identity has been compromised. I'll give a 10-second pause. Which means a little coffee break for me. Okay, so like I said, I have had students' identity compromised in previous classes, so it is important to keep a lookout for problems that might arise. So the last section here was pretty focused on life insurance. And so life insurance is really death insurance, but they have a positive spin on it. And so again, I'd like you to go to the discussion questions or the chat box for why does cash value insurance look attractive initially? And why is it terrible in the long run? So cash value insurance is the one that was referred to as whole life insurance, which has a nice ring to it. It covers you for your whole life, but it turns out it really sucks as insurance in terms of trying to double up the investment. So if you want to put some chat into that, why does cash value insurance, the alternative that we learned that is advised by Dave Ramsey and myself is term insurance. So a term policy is one that lasts whatever you buy. It could be 10 years or 20 years. And once that term expires, you no longer have insurance. So Jalen, because you don't really need it, that I was kind of wondering, why does cash value insurance look attractive initially? Can you unmute and just tell me what you were thinking there?
I don't really know, to be honest. I just That's the first thing I thought of.
Okay. So did you watch, first of all, did you watch the video?
Yes.
Okay. So the cash value insurance, do you remember what it did or how it, what was different about it than a term policy? Why do we call it cash value insurance?
I forgot.
Okay. So who can help out here? Give me why don't you put in the chat box, everybody, what's the main difference for cash value? What is cash value insurance? Why don't everybody give a stab at it, whether you're right or wrong? Cash value insurance. I'm going to see where you're at with this. Again, term policy is the one that Dave recommended. Cash value, what did that mean for whole? It's otherwise known as a whole life policy. Okay, so form a permanent, has a savings account. Good, Hannah. So it has a savings account built into it. Same thing, Rachel, nice. It builds up a savings policy. So that's why we call it cash value, is that there's the savings component to it. And so now let's take a look at why it kind of sucks by looking back to what I introduced you to before. And Dave had this on some of the video. But if we look back to this graph right here, there it is. So the money that you're putting in, let me go back up a little bit further here. So the money that you're putting in each month is, with this example, $145 a month. So the premiums are higher because they are, you're kind of building up this cash value, but it's like putting money into your savings account. When you put into something that's really safe, what's true about the risk reward? Go to the chat box. If you put your money in something that's very, very safe, like there's not very much risk, what's true about the reward? Is it a high reward or low reward? Good. Low risk, low reward. Good. So that's the trade-off we're looking at. So this cash value thing is based, it is guaranteed. So it is very safe. So that there's no doubt about that. But here, if you're treating it for an investment purpose, it really sucks. With the system that we're learning with the 7 baby steps, you've already got a cash value built up with your emergency fund so that if something happens, you have cash accessible. And if you're a younger person, as we're going to get into, by the way, in the next chapter, next week, we'll be getting into the investing stuff, which is super fun. I think you'll enjoy. And this is kind of a slight introduction to that we've got this cash value here that from you start here at age 30 is what the graph is showing, and you play that $145. And because it's a low return, your cash value is really low after even 20 and 40 years. Whereas if you had put that same amount or that difference into some of the investment instruments that we're going to learn about next chapter, you would have this kind of money. At age 50, you've already exceeded the $125,000 whole life policy value if you died, which means you've already got yourself self-insured. If 125 is what you determined is all you need, then after 20 years, you've got that amount. And so if you had a term policy that was a 20-year term starting at age 30, so if we started here with a term policy that went 20 years, let me put term policy of 20 years at the $10 a month. If you had an unfortunate accident and died, your family and kids would be taken care of during this 20-year time frame. But then once your term policy runs out, you've got a investment worth 133. That whole life policy was only 125. So you're already ahead of the game. Furthermore, if you are fortunate enough to just keep letting that investment ride, it grows all the way to a ridiculous amount of 1.5 million, and you can become a millionaire just off this single thing. Let me take a 10-second pause. We covered a lot of ground there. Questions on whole life versus term? I might want to say too that if you're not following the system, if people are not budgeting their money, they're terrible with money or something, you know, this cash value might not be a bad option for somebody who's just going to spend it on beer and pizza and chicken wings, right? So if you're not a saver, if you don't have a plan for your money, then at least the cash value is something you have down the road that is potentially there, even though it's a terrible investment. But the bottom line is if you were going to be a terrible investor or a terrible budgeter anyway, then maybe it's better than nothing. So it can be a decent product for people who aren't being financially sound with their money, like the stuff that we're teaching in this class. Okay, so 10-second pause while I reset here. All right. Okay, so next, let's see. I want to scroll back up to the top. There might be an easier way. Oh, it's because I had it big. That's why. So we're going to do the case studies next. So if you guys want to open up your actual computer, this is going to be today's in-class exercise. And we're going to look at, maybe we'll start with Brianna since we just got out of there. So let's go to Brianna. So Brianna's life insurance plan. So Brianna is a recent college graduate, and she's single and lives on her own. And let's see, I'm trying to change my setting there so I can read the whole thing over. Single and lives on her own. She has an entry-level job as a reporter at a newspaper and is trying to save up some money to purchase a new car. Her brother sold her a $100,000 whole life policy, and she's currently paying $115 a month in premiums. She started doing some research about life insurance and discovered term insurance. She's considering switching to term insurance, but she's worried about hurting her brother's feelings. So do question number 1 here. Should Brianna stick with the whole life she brought from her brother? We basically just answered that question if you were listening to what I said there before. So now I just want you to put it in your own words here for question number 1. So answer question number 1 in your forms. We'll give you a little time here to work on that. And then you can move on to number 2 if you finish number 1. So for number 2, you know, the term policy is likely better for Brianna, but it does assume that she's got a plan with her investments. So that's kind of 2 and 3 kind of go together. But we'll just leave those. Once you guys wrap up number 1, we'll go on to the next case study here. So investing the difference, it should be pretty similar for Brianna. I think the harder part is talking to her brother about it. So on the chat box, I'd like to hear what you guys would say to your brother, your sister, or maybe it's another family member of some sort that sold you the policy. You better have something prepared. Just kind of, how would you approach your brother or sister? And you can kind of play this like your real brother or sister. Those of you who have brother, sister, or friend, family member, like how would you talk to them? And you know, let's just assume this is a person pretty close to you. So you can talk smack to them if you want, or you can have fun with them. But how do how do you approach them? Do you take the gentle approach, or do you just say, hey, here's the deal. I want to see what your insights are on that in the chat box. Yeah, nothing personal. Good, Reese. The insurance you sold me is awful, Austin. Now, and I'd agree. You could, oh, Corey, you ripped me off. I don't need this life insurance. Yeah, you know, you'd have to know what your relationship is on how gentle you want to be, but having the rationale, you can see that if you go back with that graph that we just went through and understanding the logic of it, there's not much they can say, I don't think, right? It's just like, okay, and you know, like nothing personal, as Reese said, but here's my reasoning why. So you take that kind of scientific approach to it and results, show them that you have a plan for your money and it doesn't involve whole life policy. It'd be a pretty good approach, I think, to taking it. Hopefully, if they are a true close person, they would understand that. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Can't remember if I can open up that way. I might be able to, but I just went down here. All right, so let's look at Garrett and Car Insurance. So Garrett, looking at car insurance, Garrett has an older car, and the older car is worth about $5,000. He thinks he's paying too much for auto insurance and wants to find out how he can save some money. He decides to look into raising his deductible from $250 to $1,000. By doing this, he can save $200 per year. So he's going to save the $200 per year on premiums, right? So I know this insurance stuff starts to get a little foggy after a while, but when we think about saving money per year, it's with the amount that you would be paying if there's no accident. Like, this is the for sure amount of money that you're going to be saving in premiums. Now, to do that, he's raising his deductible from $250 to $1,000. So remember, the deductible comes into play when you have a wreck. So if you have a wreck and it's a $4,000 wreck, $250 would be your share if you had a $4,000 wreck with the $250 deductible. However, if it's $1,000, or if you have a $1,000 deductible and you have a wreck, then you're only going to get a check for $3,000, meaning you're going to have to cover the $1,000. So if you haven't done so already, start entering in question number 1 here. If Garrett raises the deductible, would it be worth the risk? This one really takes you to justify your answer. So think about that as you go through it. I don't think it's necessarily a no-brainer for Garrett. We'll give you a little time here to work on that. Number 1. I'll just make a comment here so that we refresh our memories what collision is. So collision is going to cover your car, covers your car if it's your fault. If it's the other person's fault, your car gets covered. I told you about my cars that I've had totaled a couple times. So collision is the thing that's pretty expensive. As we saw when we went through our example, it can raise your premiums quite a bit. Okay, so you don't have to do 3. Those of you who started it, I was just trying to get your brain going a little bit more. But I do want you to come back to the chat box. And if you want, you could cut and paste your answers on will it be worth the risk. So back to question number 1. We haven't done this before, but if you want to cut and paste your answer from number 1 into the chat box, or just paraphrase if you want to type it quickly, I'm kind of curious, will it be worth the risk? Okay, so Corey, you say yes with the emergency fund. Corey, how big on your emergency fund are you thinking there? 3 to 6 months, good. Yeah, if he's at 3 to 6 months, so I think that answer would be based on 3 to 6 months. It certainly becomes a little more questionable if you're on baby step number 1 and you're still paying off debt. If he's at $1,000 emergency fund only, one car wreck could wipe out his $1,000 emergency fund. So that might be a little too risky. But you know, it's personal finance. So I mean, either answer is fine, but you can see that if you have 3 to 6 months, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer, right, to go for it. But otherwise, we should maybe proceed with caution. And maybe there's even an intermediate step. With these case studies, we don't know. Maybe there's a $500 deductible that would save some of it, and maybe he'd feel pretty comfortable with a $500 deductible instead of a $250. Okay, what about the collision one on the chat box? If you guys want to do the same thing there, would that be a smart idea to eliminate collision? And certainly the emergency fund would help on the collision answer too, but that could be a bigger deal. Yes, but don't drop it too low. Corey, on the collision, it usually is you either have it or you don't have it. So the insurance company is going to price out collision based on the value of your car. They're going to assume that if your car gets totaled, what that value would be on the collision. So you probably won't be able to choose a rate for that. All right. If he isn't at fault, Hannah, fault for accidents, but that's going to suck if he's determined to be at fault and he's paying out of pocket. Yeah, sometimes it can be a little questionable with that. If he has a debt on the car, you guys can quick trigger this. If he has a debt on the car, a car loan, is he going to have collision? Yes, 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 good. So that is the thing with collision or with carrying car loan debt, is that you don't have a choice, because whoever loaned you money wants that car to be fully insured, and that can get pretty expensive too. So you got a lot more flexibility when you kind of follow baby step number 2, which is what's baby step number 2? Everybody chat box, who's fast trigger baby step number 2? Pay off all debt. Hannah, nice. Quick trigger there. All right, pay off all debt, except for the house, technically. For the final exam, I'll want you to have all of those details. So it is pay off all debt, except for the house, basically, if that's applicable to you. You're basically paying everything off except for your house. All right, good. 10-second pause for questions while I set up for the next one here. Or comments, questions or comments. All right, well, let's jump to the last one. Gets us into healthcare. So John's got a healthcare plan. So John is a sophomore in college and used to be on his mother's health insurance plan. So this might happen to you guys at some point here. Used to be on mom's plan. His mom recently changed jobs and her benefits package changed. As a result, she can no longer afford to pay for John's health insurance. He's 20 years old, full-time student, and he works part-time to cover his living expenses. So he's not going to have a lot of money left over. But that doesn't have, so he doesn't have much money left over at the end of the month. He's saving up for a car, hates the idea of spending money on health insurance when he hardly ever goes to the doctor. All right, so explain the different health insurance options available for John and assess the risk or reward of each one. So what I want you guys to highlight is, what is an HSA? Let me go to the chat box. You guys can just tell me what this acronym stands for. Somebody's got that. What is an HSA in the chat box? Health savings account. Good, Jacob. And so what is typically the deductible with a health savings account? So on the chat box again, what is the deductible for a health savings account? That was brought up in the videos a little bit. It's a big one. I'll give you a hint. Anybody got it? It's probably worth an extra credit point if somebody's got that. And this is kind of the typical deductible. It can change, but. All right, seeing none, it's usually about $5,000. So Madrid, you're possibly right. I don't know if anybody tried to Google or not, but it's usually it's sometimes called a high deductible plan. And if you had it low at, like Madrid just said, $1,350 or $2,700, your monthly premium's going to be higher again. So here's kind of the deal of what the insurance company's thinking. You're a 20-year-old full-time student, healthy as an ox, and you're an athlete or whatever. The likelihood of you having a problem is really low. And so if you agree to pay the first $5,000 of anything that happens to you, then the premium's going to be low and you can start to save up. So we call this the health savings account, because you are going to be building up your own savings. So you build up, and this is what I want you to do. You guys can start to put in your answer for number one. Explain the different health insurance options available for John. Go ahead and say an HSA is an option, and you can put in, it's a high deductible plan, but if he's healthy, which is what this problem is stating, he can start to save up money. So when you make your monthly premiums, your premium goes into a savings account. Premium is partially saved. So, for example, let me just make up a number. If you have a $200 premium that you're paying per month, 150 of that could be going towards the savings account. Let's call it the HSA. So what you're really doing is building up money in an account that's yours. And of course, that's the money that you're going to access if you actually do get hurt or need to use it. So the premium's partially saved. $50 of it, or some portion of it, is going to go to the health insurance company, because if you do come down with coronavirus or something and you need some treatment that ends up running $20,000, they're still going to be paying out $15,000, right? So in the course of a year, if you have some event that causes you to have health bills, what's going to happen is your health savings account is going to be drained. So your $5,000, let's say that you got to a point where you actually saved up $5,000, that is going to be drained. Now, if you're healthy, and you continue to not have to go to the doctor very much, then this savings account can grow. So imagine if you go 4 years, which some of you young people, that might not be that hard. If you go 4 years, maybe your account is built up to $7,500. Now, after your account is built up to $7,500 and you have coronavirus or something and it wipes you out in a given year, you still have a deductible of just $5,000. So your savings account is going to drop to $2,500, which will then be what you'll be adding to for the next year. All right, I think I've talked plenty on that. Let me take a 10-second pause. You guys are learning more than what most people know about these savings accounts. They're becoming more and more popular, but does anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so that might be an option for our young person. The alternative is what you saw as a PPO. So preferred provider, where we had the in-network, out-of-network, like we had with our exercise that we did. That is called a PPO. And there's another acronym for it too. But how those plans generally work is that you get sick, and let's say, as we did in our exercise, let's say you have to have some sort of, let's say a minor surgery here of $4,000. So you have a $4,000 bill come due. Depending on your plan, like the one I have for Ottawa University is an 80-20 plan, which means Blue Cross Blue Shield, my provider, is going to pay 80% of this bill. So they get 80%, and I pay 20%. So 20% of $4,000 is $800. So Russ is going to pay $800 of that, and these guys are going to pay $3,200, the health insurance company. So this $800 is going to count towards my deductible. So again, using my health insurance plan at OU as an example, I have a $1,000 deductible with my 80-20 plan with OU. And so now I have $200 left on my deductible. So if I go and have another event that cost me, let's just use $4,000 again, just to keep the numbers easy. So now I have 6 months later, I have another $4,000 event. What's going to happen is I still have $200 of my deductible to make up. So it's not going to be on the new event. It's not going to be $800. I'm going to have to pay $200, which then uses up my maximum deductible, and everything's 100% covered after that. And so for my second $4,000 event, Blue Cross Blue Shield is actually going to end up paying $3,800 of that, and I'm going to pay $200. And then if I have another $4,000 event, I would pay $0, and they would pay the full thing. Okay, questions on that? Let me do a 10-second pause. Okay, so what I wanted you to do for this example then is to fill in number 1. And at the bottom here, would a health savings account be a good option for John? Go ahead and fill that one in. Would a health savings account be a good option for John? Why or why not? I'll give you 4 minutes here to finish off the page. All right, so I'm just posting what the calendar looks like. So we've got the month of April pretty mapped out for you. We've got 12 chapters in the book total. And I don't know if this can get a little bigger maybe. How about right there? We've got 12 chapters total. And so basically each Sunday night, we'll be having the chapter content due. That is subject to change, depends. Sometimes I end up spending a little bit more time, but I suspect this is the most likely path. So I have all of your due dates up there as far as for the regular Sunday content. So this Sunday, you've got the Chapter 9 stuff, the e-text videos, quiz test, all the normal stuff that we've been doing. A few of you didn't complete all of the homework there. So remember last night, the insurance radio case call study was due. You can do that for 80% credit. Any of the previous homework, I just have a 20% penalty for late work. So it's definitely worth getting that those material in for your overall grade. Any questions on the schedule? So the last thing I want to do today, if there's, let me make sure I pause long enough for any questions. Okay, so this investing chapter is a great one that I think you're going to like. And I wanted to just leave you today with checking out this investing calculator. We've used it before, but we're going to use it a lot in the next two chapters. Chapter 10 and 11 are kind of similar in that regard. So one deals with the tax treatment of your investments. That's chapter 11. And this one is the more on the types of things to put your money into for investing. And so what's exciting, I think, as a young person, if you guys really internalize this stuff, I know I don't have all of you sold on like not using credit cards and not having to build up credit, maybe even not getting avoiding a car loan. But this can be so huge for your future, and you can easily become a millionaire if you really start to internalize some of this stuff. And so if you start with nothing in the investment calculator, we're going to teach you things, places to put your money that you can earn a 10% rate of return. So similar to the investment that we said with the term life versus whole life, how the insurance company makes money is they pay you that lousy cash value rate of return of, let's say, 2% or 3%. And then they do what exactly we're going to be going over is put it into the stock market and into equities. Even during this coronavirus down drop of the stock market has always recovered. If you're in it for the long haul, you really have minimized a lot of the risk that people have about the stock market. And so those are some of the lessons that we'll learn as we go through it. But if you take that $250 car payment that you might have been making otherwise and earn 10% on it for the next 40 years, so you're 20 now and now you're 60. By the time you're 60 years old, that single decision just made you $1.5 million. And so our investing calculator is fun. We're going to learn where you should put your money to get this type of expected return. On the investing calculator, you know, if you think you're making good money, making $40,000 a year, maybe as a starting pay for some job after you graduate from OU, which would be great if you made $40,000 a year. Well, check this out. By the year 2048, you are, whoops, I got wrong draw. I need my squiggly. By 2048, you are earning interest on your investments equal to what you were making at your job, right? So if your investments have built up by 2048, which again, it's 2020 now, so this is 28 years from now. I know that sounds like forever, but your investments are now worth $414,000 and you're making more on your investments than you are at your job. And so you continue to let that roll. You can probably get there a lot quicker. I just did $250, but if we give up some coffee, you know what happens? Oops, These buttons down at the bottom are kind of fun to play with. If I give up some coffee, 2.4 million, that assumes $5 more per day at Starbucks. Restaurants, 3.6. What about a pizza? A couple pizzas a month, 4.9. I give up some soda. I give up going out for lunch. So these buttons are kind of fun to play with, thinking about the opportunity cost of the decisions I'm making. No, we don't want to give up pizza for the rest of our life, but you can see the impact that that has on your investments. All right, well, that will bring us to a close today. So I will stay on the line. Glad you guys made it through. Hope you're having fun and staying safe, all bundled up. So if you have any questions, I'll stay on the line. But otherwise, class dismissed.